Hello and welcome. The number of COVID-19 cases are now coming down in countries like India, though they're rising elsewhere. But the larger issues that COVID-19 has brought out, particularly in areas like gender, is something that we have to address and maybe respond to as soon as possible. These concern not just gender sensitivity, but also issues like gender violence, mental health, and so on. To understand this better and what needs to be done, both from a policy perspective as well as in partnership with organizations who are working on this issue on the front lines, I am now joined by Poonam Muttreja, Executive Director of the Population Foundation of India. Ms. Muttreja, thank you very much for speaking with us. So a broader question first. We are now 8 months into COVID-19 and also into some form of lockdown or the other. This has had a tremendous impact on homes and particularly on women, both in rural as well as in urban India. What have you taken away?
So, first of all the essential services that women use much more because of their reproductive, sexual and other aspects of their biology have got completely neglected. So the demand for family planning services has gone down. Women are scared to go to health facilities, but the facilities also are not providing help to women on, let's say, contraception, which means India is going to have 26 million couples are going to go through a pregnancy without planning for it. Second, women, are the ones who are responsible for a child's health. Immunization, for instance. Immunization rates went down by 25%, close to 25%. Women and girls, the burden of work in the households, whether urban or rural, increased dramatically because husbands, parents, in-laws, children were all at home and women had to fetch more food, more fuel, more water for the family. Third, violence against women and girls increased because women were locked in the house with the perpetrators of violence, and a lot of the frustration, I'm afraid, that men have came out on both the women and the young girls. They were the victim. They couldn't go anywhere to report given the lockdown, and they couldn't even move out to deflect the situation. Often women go to their parents' house or a friend's house or neighborhood or something. But in this situation, they were captured in captivity with their perpetrators. Fifth, girls, because they began to do a lot more work at home, they are the ones who got the least, even when there was education online. It is the girls who suffered because the phones went to the order of priority of using even smartphones, leave alone connectivity to internet, is father, then son, then mother, then daughter. So girls had very little access. Only 11% of girls across the country had any access at all. We did some studies and we found that 80% of the girls we interviewed, young girls in Bihar, they wanted support for they said they experienced tremendous anxiety throughout the lockdown. Girls are worried, the young girls are worried about two things which always happens when there are pandemics or disasters, which is that girls drop out of school and there is early and forced marriage. There is also reports of slavery, of young girls, selling young girls for the flesh trade and so on. So the story for girls is all this existed even before. Family planning is a challenge, reproductive health, maternal health is a challenge, immunization, but all these silent factors got exacerbated. So it got much worse for women and girls than for the men. And finally, cooking. Cooking under resource constraints where people have lost their jobs, where there is insecurity about jobs. So the burden falls on women to feed. Always women eat the last and the least. And here it was even meager eating. So I'd like to say that not only did their biology biological factors fail them, but in terms of mental well-being, in terms of physical well-being, and their sexual and reproductive right, which is access to family planning, and finally access to abortion. In India, there's 16 million abortions every year. There were no abortion services available. And the private sector also failed women, because if many women, even the poor, we know that 65% of the expenditures are on in the private sector. The private sector almost closed down in the small towns and villages. So the situation for women in the pandemic requires serious attention, and we need a post-COVID response that looks at women and girls. And also we need to put in mechanisms in place. What do women do when they're experiencing violence, even under normal circumstances? But let our post-COVID response at least be a serious response to women's realities, women and girls' realities.
Right, and I mean, this sounds this sounds crazy. I mean, if I have to, for lack of any other word, at every possible level. Now, if I were to pick up a few of them, so you talked about girl child, for instance, losing out of school, or the ability to go to school or early college, or being pushed into marriage. Now, that's one kind of problem. The biological and reproductive issues that you talked about is another kind. The mental health is a third kind. Violence that they face at the hands of maybe spouses or other family members is a fourth kind. How would you prioritize them? Though I fully understand and acknowledge that each of them is critical and deserves a proper response. Is there a way to prioritize and or distribute the responses in a manner that it's more efficient and effective?
Yeah, so I'd like to say we prioritize health first, because we're already in a pandemic, which makes them more vulnerable. So pregnant women are more vulnerable. We don't know the impact on children. So we have to create special facilities, just like, let's say, Max has COVID facility hospital and non-COVID facility hospital. So we need to separate the services. We need COVID facilities and non-COVID facilities. Even in the rural areas, we need to strengthen our public health system. The public health system, countries that have done well, developed or developing or emerging economies, are the ones that had strong public health systems. Even the most developed countries, as you know, that didn't have strong public health systems, did not do well on COVID. So India needs to put, our public health system was already in ICU. We need to lift it out. We need to strengthen our public health system, and we need the response to women's, because of their biological and special needs, we need greater attention to ensuring that family planning services are available, for instance, not just in public health facilities, but we should have partnership. This is one place I encourage partnership and a responsibility and role for the private sector. Okay. Second, I'd like to say that, within our existing infrastructure, for instance, education, schools closed down. But what stopped, girls, one of the things I forgot to mention is that 60% of the girls can't afford sanitary pads. They get free sanitary pads in schools. Now the schools closed, but what stopped the school system, education system, distributing to their home or through the ASHA or A&M or the Anganwadi worker? We have 3.3 million frontline health workers who could have been used well, who could have been paid well, and to give these services. So we could have had distribution of not just contraceptives, but we should have had distribution of sanitary pads for the girls across to their homes, or ration shop. We have too many infrastructures, for distribution, fortunately in our country, which could have been put to good use. Finally, I think this digital divide that we have, where people in the rural areas and the poor kids have a much bigger divide in terms of educational attainment. It's been a wasted year. It's been a year of anxiety for these people. Why can't we have facilities where at social distance we have children coming to school in especially those districts where there's never been COVID. There are so many tribal areas, we haven't had a single case of COVID. The most backward areas actually have the least COVID. Why could we not have put the district? I am all for DMs. We should put the district magistrate in charge. They have a more important role to play than the PM at the district level. So they could have taken a call. Where is it that we can provide what facilities? Where there is no COVID, could we experiment with schools? 10 children going even once a week would be great for their mental health. Extraordinary times and require extraordinary solutions. And young kids, even one day a week going to school, would really keep their mental well-being in a better situation. So there is, this is time for innovation, and NGOs are doing huge innovations across the country. Instead of, the government dumping them after they did the relief and making laws which are going to make them more dysfunctional, this is the time for government to take advantage and use the NGO sector's commitment, innovation to work across the country.
Right. So let me pick up one more point. You talked about the challenges faced within homes, where, and there were two points that you made, and one was quite interesting. The first, of course, was violence. The second was access to a phone or a mobile phone, and therefore information, entertainment, and so on. So how do you feel that, these are very, very daunting challenges, but how do you feel that these two could be addressed from a policy framework? And maybe, as you said, these things, at least, the solution lies more in a disaggregated approach and a decentralized approach rather than a federal structure where you kind of push everything down.
Right. Everyone may not have a phone. Why I do want to see a digital divide narrowing. Almost everyone in India except the homeless today have television. We have government's own channel, Doordarshan, where the quality is quite improved today. Gone are the days, when we were growing up and we saw those very boring programs. I am quite impressed with the kind of things that are happening on Doordarshan. There are great anchors, there's, all kinds of things happening. So why could we not do education of children? So you choose Monday for class 2, to take Tuesday for class 3, and do some education which cuts across 3 years and 4 years. There are methodologies and so on. So television was a missed opportunity in terms of digital. Then why can't we also use the cell phone for messaging on behavior change and health education, including on ending violence? People do need to be reminded. I'm sorry, but again, I'm not anti-men, but the way we have brought up our men is so bad that we need to help them now be less violent, be less patriarchal. And they have the phone. Can we not send messaging, good messages, convincing, powerful? India is home to the best film industry. The film industry came out in a big way to do fundraisers and, concerts and so on. Why couldn't we do messaging? We use this opportunity. They were all free. And, our experience with some of the celebrities they gave us more time during this lockdown than any other time. So we could have used them to make short films, good messaging. This was, again, people are sitting at home. There are thousands of filmmakers, forget the Bollywood industry. We were doing it in our own little way. PFI is a small NGO. We made 700 short films and programs for MyGov. Website and for states across India. But we who are not producers of great, production houses, why couldn't we ask? If the government can bully, not only, but in this case, request different channels to do their own programs. People were tired of hearing just these experts, great experts we have health scientists. We needed people messaging. We needed people to talk about these issues on effective ways to have compassion, kindness, as a
Right.
treatment for COVID lockdown.
And you believe that that approach will work to some extent. It's not going to solve the whole problem, but it can
No,
can
it
help.
won't
Okay.
solve the whole problem. It works, I'll give you an example. There's entertainment education is the new mantra for changing social norms and behavior across the world.
Yeah.
Seoul City in South Africa for 20 years has had a program which totally, there was a perception that in South Africa half the young population will be wiped out because of risky sexual behavior and HIV/AIDS as a result. This entertainment education, which is, we all take inspiration from Seoul City. In 20 years, so the sexual behavior is the most difficult behavior to change, and they changed it. In Brazil, we found fertility rates came down from 6 per woman to 3 per woman in 5 years when there was entertainment education favelas there. In Nicaragua, so in India, we had this program called Hamrahi, which Ashok Kumar did 25 years ago. And PFI did something called Main Kuch Bhi Kar Sakti Hu, Feroz Abbas Khan directed it. When we evaluated it, we didn't believe the impact. 8%, for instance, women said they plucked the courage after seeing 52 episodes to negotiate contraceptives with husbands. And normally in India, in an average patriarchal conservative household, which is most households, the women don't dare discuss family planning and contraception with their husbands. And 20% men and women, after seeing 56 of our episodes, said it was not right to beat their partners
Right.
or get beaten by their spouses. Now, this is huge. We had to get an international evaluator to India to evaluate our evaluation whether we were right. No, the impact is tremendous, believe me. And COVID time, our feedback on our own behavior change communication was the impact was much bigger because people were anxious, people wanted well-being, and they were watching TV a lot more than they normally did.
Right. And I mean, I think whether it's gender or climate change, the power of communication is something that can definitely be far
And
more.
I just want to add one more thing.
Yeah.
What has happened is because, again, the power of communication, people have access to information. They know how the better half lives. So people are more ready for a change. It's not that we are making good programs and that's the only reason people are changing. The aspirations, we have to use and bring out the aspirations of the people which have already changed. So we have to do a play with the aspirations to create a bigger change, and that potential exists today more than ever.
Right. Last question. As you look ahead, how do you see us coming together on this? I mean, if gender is a critical area, and it is for India Spend as well. I mean, it's one of the 4 areas that we focus on.
Yes.
How do you see us as a country coming together or converging on bringing about more awareness and therefore improvement in gender equality, in gender lifestyle and gender empowerment from a workforce point of view?
So one is we have to invest more in behavior change communication, and we have to understand the science and art and run with it. It's cost effective when you do it at scale. Number 2, we have to, violence, which is a huge, not just mental health issue, but it has too many negative externalities and consequences. Violence must become a public health issue. It is not a public health issue. Today, a doctor looks away when he realizes a woman is being beaten. Even when he or she examines them. A child is sexually abused, a doctor looks away. So, and the public health system, because violence is not part of it. Both sexual and other forms of domestic violence should be part of the public health system. Right. Third, as I said, India Spend has done read some great articles you guys have done on budgets. And we need to invest more money in public health. If pandemic has taught us one big lesson, which is strengthen your public health system and spend more money. We have to invest more in public health system, not just in terms of finances, but human resources and a very good management approach. We cannot have governance failures. Now we realize it's a life and death issue, not just for the poor, but the richest too.
Right. Poonam Muttreja of the Population Foundation of India, thank you so much for joining us, and let me also extend my congratulations to you on completing 50 years.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.